All right, welcome everybody. I have a small cold, so if I'm being a little bit nasal or sneezing or something, don't worry, it's fine. Um, um, Also, if you haven't been to Lugano before, the weather is not normally like this. It's normally very warm and hot, and not windy and not apocalyptic. But kind of fits the conference. I feel like so it's awesome. Um, Anyways, I am gonna talk to you about peer-to-peer. I always talk about peer-to-peer. That's what I do. My name is Mathias, and I'm the CEO at Hole Punch, which is a peer-to-peer company. We build a lot of peer-to-peer stuff and a lot of really cool technology and a lot of really cool apps. And if you're a developer and you want to work with these things, I would highly recommend that you reach out because we're always hiring, and it's very, very fun to work here. And there's a lot of hole punchers at the conference, and I guarantee you any one of them will tell you that is the best job they ever had. So definitely do that. Um, so what we're going to talk about. So like I said, at Hole Punch, we work with peer-to-peer technology. We're at a broad term, we're basically trying to build we are building the peer-to-peer internet. So that's like it's a term that means different things to different people, but I'll try to dive into this, and I'm gonna just look at the time so I have an idea of how much time I have. There we go. So we have this one statement, and this is like, I've done a lot of interviews today, and they always talk about why peer-to-peer, or why not centralized systems, and la la la. And in the past, when I talked about this, because I'm a nerd, I'm super nerd, I always came up with a lot of technical explanations and diagrams and la la la. But for me, it all boils down to one thing. Is the thing you're building about the users, or is the thing you're building about big tech, or are you yourself big tech? Well, we think it's all about the users, and that's our mission. So we only want to build things that's for the users, where the users are always in center, and it's only about the users, and less about companies and less about control and things like that. And that's like a statement that goes into everything we do, and that's it's like our mantra. And if we can't fulfill this, we won't build it, basically. So that's like a very, very quick way to sum up the peer-to-peer internet. And it's super, super important, and gotta get with the program. So I'm gonna go into three things today because I feel like this is like three pillars that always sums up pretty well the past, the present, and the future, especially with peer-to-peer. And it's also three things that are insanely important in the world we live in today and always will be important. But we're gonna talk about privacy and how technology affects privacy. I'll try to keep it pretty high level, but it's probably going to be a little bit nerdy. Then we're going to talk about how systems scale and how we can just make systems scale better. And especially, we're going to talk about freedom. Freedom here meaning like how we can make systems that are resilient to anything, where you're not dictated by somebody's idea of how things should work, or somebody's culture, if it differs to your culture, or just in general, the freedom of choice to do and build systems that do the thing you need them to do. That's super important to me. That's one of the things I like about Bitcoin, because it's just about financial transactions, and it's a movement around that. But it just gives you the freedom to do exactly that, and nobody can tell you otherwise. I'm like one of those people that see themselves as a rebel, although I'm not really much of a rebel because I'm a nerd. But I like being able to watch the movies I want to watch, and if somebody tells me I can't, then maybe I'll find other ways to go through it. The kind of nerd that's like, if there's a website that has a blogger because there's a paywall, you go to DevTools, you need to turn it off because why should they care, right? And I think we're all like that, where we want systems that are not dictated by this arbitrary concern or somebody's opinion, but just about, delivering the technology in the easiest way possible, and then again, just putting the users in the driving seat, right? And also giving you the ability to build commerce in the way you want to build commerce, if you want to run a business at home, nobody should tell you you can't do that. That should be possible both financially and also technologically wise. You shouldn't be forced to run in data centers and things like that. Super important stuff to me. So let's dive into it. So we gotta talk about the past first. So let's talk a little bit about centralized systems, or like I always refer to them now, like legacy systems. So basically systems, to a large degree, how the internet is today, unfortunately, and why that is, and what we can do to get further. So the internet today is just highly conscribed of this idea of servers and clients. And it's actually really funny to me because I'm not a native English speaker. I'm from Denmark. I speak Danish. And when you learn about technology and you don't have a native English brain, you don't realize what these words mean. And then at some point I went to a restaurant and I'm like, server? That's the guy who's bringing me my food. And client, it's like, it's really strong words actually. And it's like really hammering in the idea of what this thing is. And I didn't like it. And words can mean whatever they want to be, but it just gave me like an emotion. And I think that just kind of like says everything about that system. That's like, it's very, very like one person who has a lot of power and another person who's just sitting there and paying and eating the food. So let's dive into it. So basically it's a model that works like this. You're a client, you have a laptop, a computer, or a phone, or whatever, some device, and you connect to a server. If two people use your service, there's two people connecting to this server. Simple as that. If there's more people connecting to the server. The clients never talk to each other, right? They only talk through the server. They're just clients. They always talk to the server. Maybe there's, it's a centralized system with a couple of servers. That's how a lot of these things work today. But like the idea is the same. It's like one cluster. They control it. People never talk to each other. It's actually pretty dystopian in a way, I think. But that's how it is. So let's talk a little bit about how that impacts privacy and data sovereignty, like basically who owns your data and whatnot. So basically in a system like this is how all the internet services today work. You produce data. Maybe it's like cool jokes on Twitter. Sure, we all do that. Cool pictures on Twitter. And we give it to the server. We're like, hey, please take our data. The server then usually takes this data and tries to monetize it. They put ads on your cool jokes on Twitter and keep most of the money to themselves, or maybe give you a trickle so you feel like you're doing well. And that's the model. And the more money they can squeeze out of it, the better. And if you ever looked at any of the terms of services on any of the networks you use, like Twitter or Facebook, you'll often notice that there's a clause that says, hey, you own the copyright of that funny joke because that's like a basic law, but you give us a license to forever do whatever we want with that data. So basically copyright doesn't matter in that practice because that's how they monetize and that's how they can do whatever they want at any time forever. So that's pretty intense, and that's the world we live in, and that's like the way these things monetize so they can stay afloat, and that's kind of like we all opted ourselves into. So I think this is really interesting because it's opened this very interesting question that's like, if you're a very, very successful person on something like Twitter, I'm on Twitter, right? So it's not like I have an agenda against Twitter or anybody. But if you're very, very successful there and you have 1 million users and you spend 10 years building this brand and you're like the shizzle, who actually owns that profile? Like, I'm sure people with millions of followers make a decent living, but anytime the provider, i.e. Twitter, can go in and turn that off and say, no, you're done. And I'm sure they have, a system and governance and that makes this do, but they can change this at any time, and you have no say. It could be that you're no, you live in the wrong country now because we changed the rules. That's definitely going to happen more in the future. It could also be that you're saying things that they don't want you to say. That's happened to some people. It could also be something else, or you're sharing something that they consider, pornography that other cultures don't do. That's something that happens in Denmark a lot because we like to be nude. So it's always very interesting. So like basically you're just like, you kind of own it, but you don't really own it. Yeah, in fact, you don't even own it at all. And that's really sucky because a lot of people build pretty big brands like this, and I think that's a huge problem. So I'll just check the time again, sorry. Make sure, I should go faster. So in these systems also, like we have things like security and reliability, which basically means if the server goes down, tough luck, everything is down, right? Because it's kind of like the restaurant is closed, nobody gets in. So it has a lot of problems, not that good. What about scalability? So all tried this, have a server, centralized system. It's pretty popular. You get users, you're happy. You get more users, service gets a little slower. You get tons more users. At some point, the server dies, right? So it's kind of like this negative growth thing where as you add more people, you need to scale your capacity, and there's like always a max capacity. So it's like really hard to scale these things in general without lots of capital because you got to grow the middle. So that sucks because if we look at this graph here in this network here, we have a lot of people in this network, and each of these persons are providing compute, i.e. tons of compute, because they all have a device, right? And all those idle devices are just sitting there doing nothing because the server is doing all the work. And that's all being wasted. And that's another one of those things that got me into this, where I'm like, it's just really silly. And it opens this very interesting question to me of like, this is when you work in peer-to-peer, you often think about this. How do we get here? Like, why is it like the way things are? And if you go back like 20 years of compute to the 90s and even before, you kind of got to start to see the picture. And it's not because like there was a dystopian person that's like, haha, let me do this way. Or maybe there was, and I don't know about it. But like, compute used to be very, very expensive. When I was really young, we were very privileged to have a computer in my home, but that was not something everybody had because they were very, very expensive. And they get obsolete really fast, and you get a new one, and they were big, and they would, sit there. And then all of a sudden, that got a lot cheaper, and got a lot cheaper, and got a lot cheaper, and all of a sudden, we all started to have phones, and all of a sudden, we all started to have smartwatches, as some people do, and maybe people have 2 phones and stuff like that. And the paradigm just didn't really adapt to this. The paradigm was just like, that's great. But the whole idea of this centralization was kind of based on the fact that these devices were pretty expensive. And big devices still are, and that's the things you have in these server farms. You have pretty big devices, because that didn't really go down in price that much compared to the consumer devices we have, because they have to go down in price because they got to sell them to all of us. So it kind of explains why we're in the centralized present that we are in. So what's the solution? It's obviously pretty obvious because you know where I work, but it's peer-to-peer, right? So we got to rebuild, burn it all down, and rebuild and make something better. So what's a peer-to-peer system? Super simple. Peer-to-peer systems are just like, you just kill the old guy in the middle. It's always good to kill old people. And just connect everybody. So then you have a system where there's nobody special. They're all just kind of connected. Everybody's the same. So what about privacy and sovereignty in these systems? So basically in systems like this, you don't have to give away all your data. You can just control what data you want to give away to which people, right? So that's super, super important. So you can have tons of data, very, very private data about yourself, that you're only sharing with yourself on your multiple devices. That's one of the things I really want to have, right? I'm personally a little bit scared of all the AI stuff that's happening because it's moving really fast and it's very scary. But what really scares me is like the data mining aspect, because these models need to be fed a ton of data, very, very personal data. That's why companies like them. But at the same time, I'm also excited about it because if I had a really, really good AI myself, it could help me a lot. So for me, like the perfect world there is kind of like I want to have tons of very private data about myself on a lot of devices that I control myself. That trains the perfect AI. Peer-to-peer systems work really well like that. I also, want to have social networks and chat groups where I can do my Danish jokes to my Danish friends so they don't get taken out of context because, maybe it's about nudity. And I can have, public profiles and various degrees of that kind of thing, all without having to use 20,000 apps and like services that say they won't leak my data, but then they actually do, la la la. Like have it built into the core of these systems. And that's what peer-to-peer can do because the data stays with the user and the user only shares what they want to share. That's super, super important. And also it gives you this idea of like, if you're for example, like in a social network, like we talked about before, like Twitter, and you have very popular data, and that peer-to-peer service changes, you can just take your data and leave. It's always your right. You can just go. You can move to a better alternative. You can move to better Twitter. Maybe somebody gives you a better offer because you're a content creator and you're very, very good at it. You just take your data, leave. All it requires is that those services have a way to be compatible with your data because your data is always in your hands. So these systems are very, very powerful. In terms of security and reliability, it's all pros, these ones. One person dies in the network, it's fine. There's still other people. So like, you gotta kill all the people. That's why they could never kill BitTorrent, if you remember that. Because like, literally had to knock on all the doors, please turn it off. And they tried. Scalability kind of tells the same way, where, you can have a couple of people connected, then you add more people. And, you don't have to connect everybody to everybody because there just needs to be a path between the network and the data kind of figures it out in a good peer-to-peer system. You just can keep adding people. And keep adding people and keep adding people, keep adding people. And it's fine. So, outside like technical difficulties with building these systems internally, these systems scale like crazy. And that's super, super exciting. That's one of the reasons why we work on them. And, it's not that we're trying to just replace centralized systems. We're trying to introduce new paradigms, new capabilities, so you can actually build things you couldn't even build before. So, imagine things like offline apps. So offline apps, that was a big trend like 5 years ago when I was working on peer-to-peer also, where people were always talking about offline websites and stuff like that. You can kill the internet and it still works, and it was kind of like a feature. With peer-to-peer apps, it's not a feature. It's just the way it is because your data is always with you, and you're just looking at data, and maybe you got some data from other people that you're looking at, but it's not like you're connecting to a service. So those things just work, and it's like a right of you. So it doesn't matter if you're here, or you're driving through the Sahara, or if there's no internet, or you're on the space station, or whatever. Your app always works. Obviously might not get data from somebody because you're not connected, but you can still write things normally, add to the data, and it's all good. Basically, nothing can go down if the only thing you're relying on is like your own computer. So that's a super simple requirement, right? And actually having peer-to-peer networks that just work within each other is also pretty solid because it means that you can still have a conversation with somebody sitting next to you because you still have a connection normally, even though you don't have connection to everybody. So whole new range of apps you can build. You can also turn off like all these arbitrary limits that we all just have come to accept as a truthful thing that just has to be there and we'd never question it. But like, if I want to send 2 terabytes of data to somebody, in the past, I tried to do this through Telegram or Slack or whatever, and they always like, set a cap. And I understand that because I ran a file sharing service in the past, and it gets really expensive really fast because they gotta host it and pay for that and the bandwidth and la la la. But like the solution again is just really simple. You just cut out the middleman, and then it's just between you and the other person, and your ISP doesn't care, and you can just send all the data you want. You might, it's not like infinite speed because you're limited by your speed and the other person's speed, but that's how it is anyway. And if you have a P2P network, usually this data can swarm between each other, so it's pretty efficient. So it's just super important and super simple. A lot of the stuff is just simplifying the architecture and just cutting away a lot of stuff we don't need. And obviously tons more. There's so many things you can build with these things that are very exciting. can't help but think today about all the ways you can make this like doomsday proof compared to other systems, because doesn't matter if you can't connect to a server in America if somebody cuts the cable in the ocean, because the peer-to-peer data doesn't care where the data lives, just care about that you can verify the data. So you can very easily have resilient backups and stuff like that. There's just like a whole range of possibilities with this stuff that's super, super exciting. And I'm just gonna check the time real quick. Oh boy, not a lot of time. And that's why we built Keat. So we launched the very, very early version of Keat beta yesterday. Or was it 2 days ago? I can't remember. And going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow. But it's very exciting, and it's like a chat app that tries to take into account all these things. We're still working out some bugs here and there, so bear with us. But it's super exciting, as it is with everything. And that's one of the things I love about peer-to-peer technology, where you can take something, I can stand here and talk about 20 minutes about all the architecture and the ways, and I could talk about for hours about all the cryptography and like the verification and like zero knowledge and how this thing is secure and la la la. And at the end of the day, you open up an app, you can write messages, you can send messages, you can read somebody else's messages, and you can't kill it. That's what it is, right? So it's like you can take all this stuff and you can just dial it down to really simple apps that the users just know how to use, and that's like super, super exciting. So I have this last part here where just, if you're really interested in technology, we have a whole open source suite that allows you to build this stuff yourself. That's the best part about it if you're like a nerd, because you can just go home, you can build something, you can ship it because it's peer-to-peer, and it's fine. So basically any kind of stack like this requires networking, discovery, and data structures. So networking just means like, connecting things together. Discovery means finding the stuff you're looking for, and data structures is like, data structures. Hey. So networking. This one is one that's like so easy and just really freaking hard. So basically, entire internet infrastructure everywhere is coupled towards client-server connections. Again, this client-server part, which means that they want you to connect to a server. So your ISP, your internet provider at home, is really trying aggressively to block everything that's coming the other way to you, because they don't want you to host things at home, even though you're allowed to, for security reasons. But it's like bullshit. But you need networking to make anything. You need to be able to connect people, even though you're not a server, because you don't want to like have to put it in the data center and stuff like that. So you need something that can connect people directly to each other all the time and works reliably and is secure and end-to-end encrypted and all this good stuff. And we have a thing called Hyperswarm that does exactly this. If you go to holepunch.to/docs, you can read more about it, but it's just a software framework that just does exactly this. It uses a really cool technique called distributed hole punching, where it just does a lot of hacking basically to penetrate all the firewalls and connect people directly, and then make end-to-end encrypted connections that are super secure and super scalable. And it's one of those things, if you're a software developer, it basically has 2 APIs, connect and accept, and that's it. And then like 1,000 lines of code underneath that does all this stuff for you. So I love those kind of things. It's my favorite things in the world. You should check it out. You can build a lot of cool stuff with that. Then you need things like discovery, where you're like, how do you find each other? If I make a Keat chat on my phone, how do other people find that Keat chat? Because we don't have a server where we store it. It also means we can't have usernames, because we need things that are not centralized. So basically, before you connect to anybody, you need to be able to find them. So if you're familiar with a technical term here, it's like something called DNS that normally allows you to do these things. You go into a browser, you put in a domain, google.com, that looks up something. That's actually you being a slave of the system, because who translates that? That's some centralized identity that they're paying for, and that's like how they do control of all the domains. That's basically why you can't find torrents online anymore, because they just go to the provider of the domain and say, take that site down. So they take the website down. And I think that's actually very scary in the future, because it's so easy to take anything down. If you're like, an entity that has the power to convince somebody to do that. but there's no technology stopping that from happening. I think that's super problematic. So we need a way to basically not have that. And that's this thing called distributed hash tables, which is a thing we use a lot. Again, holepunch.to/docs, or is it docs.holepunch.to, I think it is. Anyways, go to the website, you can find it. We have a whole deep down on distributed hash tables and how we use that to avoid this by just having no names, but just cool cryptographic identities. Super cool stuff, very easy once you get used to it. And then finally, just a quick 2-minute ramp up on data structures, and I'll let you be. You need to rewrite the whole idea and rethink the whole idea of data structures, because all the data structures you normally use are fitted to work in a client-server model, like MySQL, all this stuff. It's like spin up a server and you connect to it and you query it. Well, that doesn't work in a peer-to-peer fashion, because in peer-to-peer and any kind of network that tries to establish freedom to the users and put sovereignty into the users, you need a way for the user to run a query where the other peer or server doesn't necessarily know what they're querying for, first of all, and that they can deliver the data in a way where all the queries are verified by the user instead of the server. So that's not the server saying this is the correct thing, it's the user looking at the data saying this is correct. It's a huge difference there, and that's very, very important. So super important. And stuff like that. So it's very, very important that these things are safe for conflicts, that you can edit them at the same time, because in the P2P system, we don't necessarily control that. And finally, we need these things to be really fast, and we need them to be efficient. And it's very, very complicated. It took us tons of years to do it, but we solved all that for you. And again, go to docs.holepunch.to, and you can check out some of our databases. We have one called Hyper-B, which is really cool, that does all this stuff. And Hypercore, it's another one. And that's it. You should check out, obviously, in other parts of decentralization space, you should check out Bitcoin, super cool. It's more of a centralized thing in technical sense, but obviously not in the financial sense. It's like more one big network, but it's hard to run at home. BitTorrent, super awesome. Why I got into this stuff, I was sitting on my couch. I was like, I want to watch a movie. I couldn't. So I was like, let me learn how they work. I learned how they worked. And I wrote a bunch of BitTorrent stuff that got really popular. And I was like, that's cool. That's like the foundation of everything in terms of thinking. We like to think of ourselves as BitTorrent 2.0. And Hypercore, which is our thing, which is the BitTorrent on steroids. And then we have a lot of stuff that interacts with Bitcoin now, so you can actually add financial transaction into stuff. So it's really cool stuff, very exciting. And that's all I had to say for my 25 minutes. I hope you learned something.